Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode on my YouTube channel. I'm so excited to have you all joining me. And today we're going to talk about a topic called yielding and giving in to the people in our lives, giving in to the one above, understanding the concept of not always being the person to have the last word, and not allowing the way we respond to people and the situations around us to become bigger than they really are and to have unnecessary drama in our life. Imagine you're on the road and you're driving and you pass by a yield sign. It's a very, very busy road. You stop for a moment, look both ways, make sure there's no more cars going through, and then start driving again. Now, sometimes it can be such a busy road that you're actually waiting on that road for about 5 minutes before you can start driving again. And no matter how much of a rush you may be, you're forced to wait, because if you don't wait, you will get into a car accident. Now, if you don't clear the windshield of your car and it's full of ice or snow, you're not going to be able to see the road clearly, and then you too can have a car accident. So in order to be able to visualize both sides of the road and make sure you have the clear sign to go, you have to make sure that your windshield is always wiped clean. This is an excellent analogy to how we live our life. For some reason, we have enough time and patience on the road because we don't want to get into a car accident. So we obey those rules and regulations. But when it comes to the relationships with the people around us, we don't want to yield. We don't want to give in necessarily. We start to find reasons of why we are right and they are wrong. And that's going to lead to hatred, resentment, unnecessary arguments, gossip, and so many other problems. How can we stop, look both ways, give it enough time, make sure the lenses are clear before we proceed to any kind of relationship which may seem to be troubling us? The same concept goes for the one above. Many times we see the situation that's happening in our life as a punishment. We feel like God is punishing us. And because we don't necessarily, because our lenses are not clear enough, we don't have the clarity we need to understand the situation, we start to misjudge the intentions that God has for us. And we start to make the wrong assumptions in our mind, and sometimes distance away from the one above. How can we work on improving relationships, on yielding, on being able to give in and say, I don't have to be the last person to say something. I can change my character first. I can change the way I view the situation first. Maybe then I'm not going to jump in and have so many problems with the people around me in my life. The first way to do that is learn how to look at every situation as a third party. Don't be the one to evaluate your own relationship or your own situation and be quick in your conclusion. What does that mean? Imagine you asked your husband to go buy you corn, and instead of corn, your husband comes home with a can of peas, and you explode. You're fuming, you're furious. Why is it that he can never get it straight? Maybe he was on the phone and he was disrupted and he wasn't paying attention. It's nonsense. You can't rely on him for anything. And you get into this huge argument with him, and your entire day is ruined over the fact that your husband brought home peas instead of corn. Now sit for a second and think to yourself, what happens if your friend calls you up and tells you her story, it's not your story anymore, about her and her husband getting into an argument because she sent him to the store to buy her corn. And instead her husband brought her peas. And she's going to start crying to you and tell you what a huge fight they had, how he doesn't like her, he hates her, he never gets anything straight, there's always fights and arguments. Why is it that she has to deal with this? And you sit and stop and you tell your friend, are you seriously fighting over this? I wish I had your problems. It's only corn and peas. Big deal. He didn't get you what you wanted. Why are you letting that get into the way? Come on. It's not the end of the world. Okay, fine. Move on. It's so much easier to talk to somebody else as a third person. It's so much easier to give our advice to somebody else. But when it comes to giving advice to ourselves and how we respond to the situation, we don't necessarily follow our own advice. So when anything like this happens to you, stop and think to yourself, how would I have responded to the same situation if my friend called me, my neighbor called me, my mother called me, if somebody else called me? Now let's understand, why did this husband make that mistake in the first place? Let's understand what was behind that. Because later we find out the reason why he brought home peas instead of corn. Because when this man was growing up, his mother always taught him, when you go shopping in a store, always buy the stuff in the back of the shelves. The stores like to get rid of the older stuff first, so they put the older things in the front, and all the new stuff goes towards the back. And this husband, with good intentions, remembered his mother's advice, saw the corn in the front of the shelf, reached his hands to the back, pulled out the can, but didn't glance at it a second time to realize that wasn't corn, it was peas. So he had good intentions. He could have been more careful, but his intention was never to hurt his wife. And had his wife given him that chance to talk it over, he would have explained it to her without this entire dilemma. Rule number 2 is start to focus on the good things that people do to you. We are so ungrateful in the society that we live in. We have forgotten to start appreciating things people do for us because we take people and what they do and what God does for granted. We have a certain sense of entitlement. We think people owe it to us. And when something happens, when there's a bad relationship going on, when somebody hurts our feelings, instead of remembering how much good they did to us and focusing and saying, okay, he didn't do it for us this time. He couldn't help me right now. But how many times did he help me in the past? How much blessing did God shower with me before? Right now, I might have struggle in my life, but I have so much blessings. I have kids. I have a roof under my head. I have a good job. Or I have clothing to wear and food to eat. If our parents didn't do something for us and we get upset at them and we create this whole balagan, this whole problematic situation, instead we stop and say, yeah, they hurt my feelings, but I owe them for all the good that they did for me. When we start to stop and think of all the positive things that same person did to us, we're no longer quick in ruining our relationships with that person over something which really doesn't matter at the end of the day. And finally, the last piece of advice, which I think is so important, is let's not react to something immediately. When something happens to us, we spark, we ignite, we respond so quickly that if we sit and wait and we reevaluate the situation later, we realize, hey, I would not have said those words. I would not have reacted that way. Train yourself to be patient. Patience is virtue. Let's give an example. We have a teacher that walks into a classroom late. And as soon as he walks into the classroom late, his student goes like this to the teacher. And the teacher is fuming. This is so disrespectful. How can his student tell him that he's late? That's disgusting. What kind of manners does the student have? And the teacher, steaming inside, wants to embarrass and blow the student and kick him out of his class, but he couldn't. Because this teacher always taught his little students, who were about 6 years old, that anytime you have a problem with your friend, we have a bulletin board. And this is called the timeout half-hour rule. You have trouble with your friend? Before we start crying and making a big deal, we're going to take the half-hour rule. We're going to wait half an hour, then we're going to go and talk to our friend and try to figure out a solution and understand why your friend told you what he told you. And because that teacher was always teaching that to his students, he had to follow his own advice. So even though he was fuming at the student, he had to wait 30 minutes, follow the 30-minute rule, before he responded. Those 30 minutes were the hardest 30 minutes of this teacher's course. It was so hard to focus and teach. Finally, the 30 minutes were over and bell rang. It was time for recess. Just as this teacher was about to call the student to talk to him about how disrespectful that student was, the student himself runs up to the teacher and says, "Teacher, look, my parents bought me a new watch for my birthday. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to come to class to show it to you. Do you like it?" And the teacher said, "Oh my goodness. I thought he was being disrespectful and showing me that I was late. But instead he wanted to show me the gift his parents bought him. He loves me and I thought he's disrespecting me." And he was so glad he didn't say anything to embarrass that student. This teaches us a very important lesson in life. We have to learn to wait. If we learn to wait before we respond, the reaction will be different. We won't regret what we said. It's going to help us understand the bigger picture first before we blow up. We start to realize, if I gave him the benefit of the doubt, I wouldn't be as upset as I am right now. So when we take these 3 rules into consideration, we learn to give in to the people in our life. We learn to appreciate what God does for us and realize not everything is in our own understanding. And we live a much better life full of quality and bliss. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.